He is the Pocket Square Professor, and you'll learn all about the cloud. So listen as he teaches technology. He is the Pocket Square Professor.
Greetings everyone, and welcome to this next section. In this particular section here, we're going to spend a lot of time talking about the modern collaboration architecture. Now, this is a new thing. This is something that is very, as the name implies, very modern, of course. Now, what are we going to talk about in this one here? Well, we're going to be focusing on collaboration. Collaboration is essentially, people working together. But let's really focus a little bit more on what applications inside of Office 365 are we going to be focusing on. Well, the big ones that we're going to be looking at here are going to be SharePoint, Teams, OneDrive, Yammer. Those are the four main. We have a little other ones that we'll mention and talk about, of course. You'll see a lot here coming up. But really what we're going to be talking about here is going to be the file collaboration as well as meetings and pretty much the entirety. We're going to very much do a deep dive into Teams itself. So with that being said, let's go ahead and jump right in and let's start defining what exactly is the modern collaboration architecture. So I'm going to show you a picture here. Now, just a forewarning, because there's a lot of information on this particular picture. I'm not expecting you to be an expert on it, but I want to show you what essentially the high-level idea is behind it. Okay, now this is a lot. So, let me see. I am covering just a smidge of it, so I'll move myself somewhat out of the way here. Okay, looking at this here, and I've taken this directly from Microsoft. It is linked here inside of the PowerPoint. But this is there's a lot going on this particular one. We're actually going to break it down. But there are some things that I want to we're not going to focus too much on the bottom section. Now, the bottom section is really around dynamics, and, well, there's a lot of other pieces there too, but Dynamics is the big piece. We're not focusing a whole lot on that. We're going to be focusing on the top three, which is actually four when you break it down, though. So looking at the modern collaboration architecture, what the heck are we looking at here? Because there's a lot of information flowing from it, of course. But all we really want to do is to understand several different things, okay? So the first thing that we're really looking at in this particular diagram is to get an idea, first and foremost, how many different tools are included in the modern collaboration architecture. And if you look and you see all of these little tiny icons are all over the place. Now, on the link there, they actually have a legend of what all these icons are. But for the most part, you should be able to understand, well, most of these, that's Teams, that's PowerPoint, that's SharePoint, Teams, Power BI. There's a lot of different pieces that come along with this here. But just for more information, especially some of these Dynamics ones, these are ones that I am not necessarily the most familiar with. But again, Dynamics is kind of a different scenario on here. So, but looking at the users and traditionally what a user's experience is with collaboration. Okay, now we're going to break this down here by quite a lot, but I want to give you a high-level overview of what MoCA truly is. Now, as we continue on here, let's start with a simple explanation. A simple explanation. MoCA allows users to feel empowered to work in the right program for the right job and increase their productivity no matter where they access the data. Now, this definition here, it's simple, sure, but if we look at it and just break it down just a smidge, MoCA allows users to be empowered. So that's a big word, and I'm going to be using that word a lot, empowerment. This is a big, big deal, especially in the modern workspace. We're going to work in the right program for the right job and increase their productivity. Productivity is another big piece of this here. And then finally, the last piece, no matter where they're accessing the data. Now, this is their physical location. Are they inside the network, outside the network, on the other side of the world? Who knows what? But an even more simple explanation for MoCA is what tool win, or which tool win. I've also seen it before. I just like saying what tool win. What tool should I use when I'm doing something? So what we're going to do here is we're going to paint a picture in the modern collaboration architecture of a very simple process that I think is very relatable pretty much to everybody. So what we're going to do first is we're going to tell a story, okay? And this story is, and paint yourself in this light here. And most of us can probably figure it out here, but let's just say we're, in the accounting or accounts payable or whatever, we're truly in the finance area of our organization. And we want to create a budget, okay? So we're creating the new budget for next year, all right? And we have to start off somewhere, and we have to take that files through a journey. That file that we create initially starts off in a location, goes to different locations, and ends up in many other locations, depending on the scenario. So again, as we're painting this picture here and we're telling the story, we're going to start off here with the simple spot. And this is a very easy one to understand. And we're going to dive into all of these here as we talk about the individual applications, but I just want to tell you a high-level story. So again, I'm creating a budget for next year. So again, we're going to start off here with the me space, okay? So me is in quotations, meaning that it's just me, the individual. Now, Microsoft defines the individual as a single person as distinguished from a group. So this is just a person. What are some of the tools that me as a person have the ability to use inside of MoCA? Well, we could see all of these. We have our dynamic stuff here. We have Power Automate, Teams, Delve. We have OneDrive. Planner, this section of Planner here. We got Shifts is what that one actually is. Outlook, of course, we have Windows. I'm not going to go through each one of these here, but to develop content, look at this here. We have, Excel, OneNote, Word, PowerPoint, SharePoint, Publisher, and Visio. And then we have LinkedIn Learning and all of the other new pieces that come along with Viva. That's a different topic for a different conversation. We're going to take that in a little bit later. But for now, the me space is I am just a person, okay? I'm just an individual, and I am really just trying to create that budget, okay? So where do I put this? Well, traditionally speaking here, as we're creating this budget here, we're going to create the template, if you will, or just the individual contributions inside of OneDrive. OneDrive is typically the me space. Okay, now all of these tools here do fit into this, of course, but again, for the story that I'm telling, which tool win? Well, win right now is we're trying to make a budget. Which tool traditionally here is going to be OneDrive. Now, probably going to be Excel, to be honest. That's generally what we do when we create a budget, but it's going to be an Excel file inside of OneDrive. We're going to talk about OneDrive, what it is, and all of these things, but I don't care about that right now. I just care about me as a user. I'm creating this in my individual space, okay? Now, OneDrives are very important because, again, OneDrives are me. They're relative to me. They're tied to a person, okay? Now, I'm creating this budget, all right? And, well, obviously, when we're creating the budget, I need input from other people inside of other departments, right? Because I need to be able to forecast out what they're going to need. Like, hey, tell me what you need. Give me a budget analysis or a budget request. What do you need to do? Well, at that point there, I need to start thinking of how I'm going to be able to get it to them. So this is where we, again, as we're starting to analyze the differences of what we used to do versus what we do now in the modern space, the legacy space versus the modern space here, traditionally what we would do, and this is the thing that just sends chills down my spine when I hear people say it because it makes me cringe so bad of when people say, well, if I want multiple people to collaborate on a document, well, I just attach it to an email and I mail it to them. Well, we're going to talk about why that's a terrible idea here and why it is very inefficient and not very productive. But again, in this instance here, what we're looking at is me, and we're looking at OneDrive. But we need to get it to additional people. How can we do that here in the modern space? Well, we're going to jump into the next section here. And the next section is all relative to we. So this is a group of people. This is a team. Now, Microsoft loves the word team, whether it be Teams, a Teams team, which we'll talk about later on. Team is something that is a very popular topic. It's a buzzword here inside of the Microsoft ecosystem. But a team is a group of individuals, let me move myself out of the way here a little bit, a group of individuals with interdependent activities that work together towards a common outcome. So again, if we look at this definition, we are building that budget. We have a common outcome of building the budget. Everyone has to submit their essentially their budget request stuff, the interdependent activities. Everybody submits their stuff. Okay, well, in this instance here, we start bridging out to more people, but this is not necessarily a super broad audience, okay? We're just really focusing on the people, and these are really the key stakeholders that need to be able to enter their information. That's it. We need to be able to generate that piece of knowledge. Okay, easy enough. But this is where we start bridging into a good gap. Now you'll see here is that underneath of it says team, and the big tool that we're looking at here is traditionally going to be Microsoft Teams, which we will get to in time. But Microsoft Teams is where a lot of this space works. Now we're going to look at when is it appropriate to create a team, what's behind the scenes of a team. I got a spoiler here for you. When we're looking at files, everything inside of Teams is stored in one location, and then one location is SharePoint. So we'll talk more about it as we go through it. But again, teams at the end of the day are teams. That's what they are. They're groups of people working together for essentially a common outcome. Okay, now look at all the tools that are available on here. They're starting to look very similar. Again, we have Planner, we got, all of these different sections on here. We got Teams, Whiteboard, Power BI. Again, all of these that are looking the same here. Now we also have more Viva pieces here, which is going to be more machine learning type scenarios. But we'll worry about that later on. So look at all the different things that a team can do. Well, there's a lot. Outlook is still in here, where of course email is still a big deal. However, there are more efficient and more productive ways to be able to communicate and collaborate inside of the modern collaboration architecture. All right, so looking at this here, we have gone from the me space to the we space. Now we, as I said, is a smaller group of people very hyper-focused on one outcome, okay, an outcome. That could be a project, which again, in this instance here, we're creating the budget. That is a project, hey, that makes sense. Well, we also potentially could be maybe a small department, more for focused internal collaboration. There's a lot of different reasons we could create teams. It's not a black and white scenario. And believe you me when I say that, it is not a black and white scenario where we are going to put everything in Teams versus everything in SharePoint. Remember what I said. In the end of the day, everything is inside of SharePoint. It's how and what the focus of that group really is. So that's just going to make a little bit more sense as we jump into the next spaces here. Okay, let's look at here as we talk about the we space. Why do we care about Teams and where does this fit? Well, we have meetings, we have presentations. As we see, Teams is pretty much almost every one of these here. We're going to store Teams files. Remember, it's always in SharePoint. Here, we're going to manage team tasks. Oh, here, Planner, more pieces of Planner. Shifts, again, just another kind of piece of Planner, really. Overall, Teams, team instructions. Hey, that's communication to me. Team meeting, share screen / present. Okay, that makes sense. Chat, shift work. Which, that shifts as well. I don't know why that's technically Teams. It should also be there as well, but neither here nor there. Looking at all of these different sections here, performance insights, KPIs, something called key performance indicator. This is something that is very important when we're looking at measuring and how successful was this? What are our metrics on productivity? How much more productive are we? A lot of things. We'll talk about that in time. So again, looking at all of these spaces here, why do I care about Teams? Well, Teams is pretty much the focal point behind all. Look at this. This is pretty much the, we'll say it, the hub of the spoke is Team. That's why Microsoft branded it Microsoft Teams. So again, looking at this here, we have come from essentially OneDrive or potentially Outlook, depending on the scenario, inside of there where I'm just working in my own space, to Teams. Okay, now Teams here, why do I get this? And there's two main reasons when we're talking about from a file perspective. Again, going with we're doing the budget creation here. One is something called co-authoring. Now, this is a very important piece, and we'll talk about that. That's where we could have multiple people working on a document at the same time without having to lock it out. That's such a nasty thing, and I'm telling you, we'll look at it more when we get into that section there. And the other piece there is something called version history. So version history is a big deal because, again, as we're creating this document, it's going to have all of these iterations of versions. Okay, and what is a version? Well, we have version 1, version 1.1, 1.2, 2, 2.0. Again, you can understand that. So when we're looking at that overall of the versions, we got to look at that. And that's actually something that is taken care of in the back end. So, like I said, we will talk much more about that as we go. But for now, let's just focus on we're in the we space and we're working together as a group. All right, next, after we've created the budget and people have inputted their budget requests and we have a budget, we're going to go through and continue staying in the we space here, but we're going to continue working through it where it is going to the next stage there. All right, so we have lots of people. Let's just say this budget's gone through every iteration. The version is the most up-to-date version, and this is essentially one that's been approved by management and everything. So at that point there, we need to be able to publish, key word there, publish this out to the greater organization or larger group of people. So this is where we have the them space. So this is a social unit or human groupings deliberately constructed and reconstructed to seek specific goals by coordinating the action of their members. Well, what does this all mean? Well, this is a very interesting one. This is where we get into the two sides of collaboration architecture. So we have our traditional file collaboration side of things, which is very things that we would expect. And then, we're working together on documents and SharePoint and all of those things, sure. But then we flip over into the other side is that we have to be able to communicate and publish information to people. This is an interesting concept here. And this is where something is starting to become very big of this, a very big space here. So again, the them space, traditionally what we would be looking at here is this is what would be a intranet space. So we have obviously like an extranet or an internet web page. This is a space that is only available to people inside of the organization, and you, based off of your account and your permissions, you are shown things. So again, relative to you. So it's constructed and reconstructed over and over again by coordinated action of the members. So again, I want to know what is the current up-to-date and approved budget version. Well, what I would do is I would go to my SharePoint intranet site and I would find the location of where the budget is that's approved, and I would have essentially a read-only copy or whatever it is of that budget where I can get a approved copy of it, and I can say, okay, well, here's my budget. Here's one that I can share out with people if needed. So this is this space here, the technology that we're mostly working with here. And if you look at it, it's on here quite a lot, but there's quite several different areas on it. But the big piece that we're looking at is going to be SharePoint. Now, SharePoint can be divided in two sections, as we said, the file section and then the communication section. We're going to talk about both, of course. But looking at it here, we have lots of different things. We have bookings here, forms. This is a great thing here. So this is surveying. We have Power Automate. We have, PVAs, or the Power Virtual Agents here. Again, LinkedIn Learning. Teams is also into this as well as video. So this is an interesting one around Stream. Stream is basically just a way of having videos. It's kind of think of it as a corporate YouTube. But we also have inside of here these corporate comms, which is this little Y, which stands for Yammer. Now, it does have a bit of this organization space, okay? So the them space. Now, in this instance here, we're really going to be focusing on that budget, and we want it to get it to the organization. It's been approved. Great. We have it in this location. Think of this almost as a repository, if you will, of published information. Now, the next piece here is how do we want to get that published information to the organization, to the large scale space. So this is where we can use several different methods. Of course, in this instance here, we don't see Outlook on here at all, right? We don't see email as a them in part of the them, right? Well, let's kind of jump over into the last space here, which we call the us space. Now, if you look at it here, I don't see any Outlook on here. So what the heck? How am I supposed to get this information? Am I supposed to email it out to everybody? Well, we all know, anybody, especially if you work in a corporate setting right now, you'll notice that IT or other organizations, corporate communications, send out emails, and what happens to those emails? We're all guilty of it. We get too many of them, we get blasted, and we delete, or we just don't read the email. That happens in every organization I've ever worked and consulted for. Just the nature of the game. We get too much information, and it's very difficult. So we want to be able to cater that information. So what we do here is a group of individuals with a common interest and a common passion. So in this instance here, we may have a Yammer community, which is what the whole space of this is called, is a community. We may have a Yammer community that's for accounting, let's just say. And you can join it if you want. You don't have to be invited. It's open. You can jump in whenever you want and leave whenever you want. You can have a more aggregated data feed set to you, saying, okay, well, I'm actually interested in what happens with accounting, and I want to know when accounting publishes their new budget. So I would subscribe to this Yammer community, and I would be updated on this. And we're going to talk about this and where this fits into the big piece of this overall. But just to kind of recap, communities, or Yammer, are a group of individuals with a common interest and a common passion. It's important that have to be common because, again, when we're talking about publishing large amounts of information, if we were to blast that out to the entire organization that here's the new budget, most people, it would fall on deaf ears because they don't care about that. We want to be able to aggregate our data and communicate with the correct audience. That's really the big deal. I am interested in accounting because it has some sort of, we'll just say, impact on my day-to-day job, let's just say. So I want to make sure that I understand when the new budget's coming out and all of that. So this is another way of communication. The thing about Yammer is Yammer is actually a really powerful tool, and I think a lot of organizations don't truly understand how great it truly is and what it can do. We're going to talk about it. But looking at this as a very, very top level standpoint, there are 4 places that we talked about: the me, the we, the them, and the us. Okay, so there's a lot of different sections on here, and there's a lot of different tools around this. As you can see on here, I mean, this one just showing you the us space. I mean, almost all of these are Yammer in some form or fashion. It has a touch on every single one of these. So look at all the different things that we can do inside of Yammer. Well, a lot, but these are very much spaces that people will want to be a part of and want to get information from. So this is very much a bi-directional communication section. Now, with all that being said, MoCA is a concept, and I just want to throw that out here as it is a concept. I've worked with hundreds of customers on this, and nobody ever truly gets to the end goal. Okay, it's kind of like an ideal, if you will. Nobody truly gets to the end goal. However, there are some organizations that are more, I guess, open to this type of change rather than the traditional ways. And communications in an organization is very big, but communications is just as important as collaboration. So those two there working together side by side is what MoCA really is the foundation of. How are we going to get our information that we generate to the right people? That's the biggest piece of this. So with that being said, I just wanted to paint a high level picture of it here. We're going to start talking about more of the individualized sections there and more of the individualized technologies. But for now, I wanted to give you a high-level overview of what MoCA is. Okay, so like I said, there's a lot of information on this here, but I don't want to dive too far into it. So with that being said, we're going to stop it here. We're going to jump into our next section here where we start talking about some of the more fine-grained pieces of this. So thank you for attending this particular lecture here, and I will see you over on the next one.